I faked panic attacks for an entire year just to expose my sister's lies, and the truth I uncovered shattered everything we thought our family was built on. For an entire year, I faked panic attacks to expose my older sister, Emma, after discovering she had been secretly recording and manipulating me to make me look unstable. Her lies stretched from private videos to false claims to our mom, teachers, and even therapists. I carefully played along, performing the panic attacks, watching her grow confident in her deception, until one night I overheard the full extent of her lies. Everything came to a head during a family dinner when I confronted her with proof, screenshots, messages, and recordings. The confrontation splintered our family. Emma went silent, Mom struggled to process the truth, and I was left facing the aftermath of both her lies and my own decisions. Though I had exposed her, I was left wondering if I had become exactly what she wanted me to be. The house was silent after that dinner. Even the clatter of dishes had ceased. Mom sat at the table with her hands folded over her lap, eyes red, staring at the mess of paper and photos I'd thrown down. Emma didn't move. She just sat there, lips pressed tight, fury simmering behind her pale eyes. And me, I was shaking, not from faked panic, but from the adrenaline, the fear, and something else I didn't want to admit. Guilt. Guilt because I had played with fire. Pretending to break down for months, faking panic attacks, creating drama. It had worked, but at what cost? And yet, guilt mingled with relief. Finally, someone else couldn't twist my reality. Finally, someone else had to answer for their lies. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed, the moon casting a cold light across my room, and replayed every detail. Every lie Emma had told, every whispered accusation, every fake tear she had let fall so convincingly. And in that silence, I realized something. She had been planning this far longer than I imagined. A whole year of preparation, a lifetime of practice. I had only noticed the recordings, but the real damage, the manipulation of everyone else's perception, had been far more insidious. The next morning, Emma was gone. Not just leaving the room or the house, but physically gone. Her bedroom door locked, her car missing, her phone unanswered. Mom muttered that she had gone to a friend's house to think, but even as she said it, her hands shook. I could see the uncertainty in her eyes, the same uncertainty that had been there the night before, but magnified now. I thought the nightmare was over. I thought my careful exposure of her lies had ended this chapter. But by the time I got to school, the first whisper of it had already spread. The teachers had received her version of events before mine had reached them. Her quiet, polished voice had cast me as the volatile, unpredictable sibling once again. Even with proof, people wanted to believe her. It was the first time I felt what it really meant to be trapped by perception. I wasn't only fighting her anymore, I was fighting a crowd of people who only saw the surface. 2 weeks later, my only safe refuge, my therapist, called me in for an emergency appointment. She had received an email, carefully constructed, claiming I had been aggressive toward Emma, including details only someone living in our house could know. My stomach dropped. She handed me a printed copy. My blood ran cold. My own sister had managed to manipulate even professional intervention. That night, I stayed in my room and stared at the ceiling, replaying everything. And that's when I found the first hidden clue I had missed. A small envelope taped under my desk. Inside, handwritten notes, detailed plans, dates, Emma's entire strategy for destabilizing me. It wasn't just a year-long plan. It had started the moment she noticed I was vulnerable. Every misstep I had made, every moment I had confided in her, had been cataloged for use against me. The discovery brought anger and fear in equal measure. But I realized something else. She had underestimated me. She hadn't accounted for my own patience, my own willingness to endure, my own ability to gather evidence quietly. I would need more than anger to survive this, though. I would need a plan. The next month became a careful game of observation. Every word she said, every move she made, I cataloged. I learned where she hid things, which teachers were more likely to take her side, which friends she confided in. I noticed patterns, her subtle manipulation of Mom, how she played innocent while planting seeds of doubt. And then I noticed a new pattern, one that shocked me even more. Emma was afraid, fearful of losing control, of being exposed beyond repair. That fear became my weapon. I began to subtly bait her, letting her believe she was still winning, still holding the strings. I let small lies slip past her, so she would overreact in ways I could document. I started leaving traces of evidence, strategically found by mom and teachers. Slowly, quietly, the balance began to shift. It wasn't easy. Some days I hated myself for the deceit, for the performance, for the fact that I was manipulating the manipulator. But I told myself it was different. I wasn't doing it for control. I was doing it to survive, to reclaim the truth. And then the first real confrontation came. Not at dinner, not at school, but in my own bedroom. She had crept in, trying to borrow something from my desk without me noticing. I caught her red-handed, the envelope in her hands, the one I had thought was hidden from everyone. She froze. For the first time, Emma's composure cracked. "You don't know what you're doing," she whispered, but her voice trembled. "Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing," I said, voice low, steady. "And I know exactly what you've been planning for the past year. Every step, every lie, every trick." She paled, then she laughed, sharp, bitter. "You think you're smarter than me?" "I don't think," I said. "I know. And now it's over." Emma stormed out, slamming my door so hard the frame rattled, but I felt something shift inside me. For the first time, I believed that I could survive the fallout and maybe even repair what had been broken. The days after that confrontation felt like walking on a tightrope over a canyon. Emma avoided me, but her presence was constant, hovering in every glance, every whispered comment Mom tried not to make. I had thought I could relax once I'd caught her in the act, but it became clear that Emma's reach extended further than I had imagined. She wasn't just a manipulator in private, she was a strategist who could infiltrate everyone's perception. I started noticing things I'd missed before, notes missing from my school planner, subtle suggestions from Mom, questioning if I was handling things okay. Even my friends, the ones who had comforted me when I broke down, began acting strange, hesitant, nervous, as if stepping lightly around some invisible minefield. Emma was still winning in a way. Her fear of exposure hadn't weakened her influence, it had sharpened it. One afternoon, I overheard a conversation in the living room. I had been sneaking past to grab my laptop, but her voice stopped me cold. "She's on to me. I think she knows everything now. But if Mom finds out too much, it could ruin everything. I have to control the narrative before it slips." That last part, control the narrative, made my stomach twist. She had been writing, planning, reporting to Mom, but there was more. Something larger, more calculated. I realized I couldn't just expose her anymore. I had to outmaneuver her at every turn, protect myself while systematically dismantling her influence. It started with small maneuvers. I returned emails she had sent to teachers, not as proof, but subtly pointing out inconsistencies. I left her diary, not the real one, but a decoy, open on the counter where Mom could accidentally find it. Every lie she had told about me, every fabricated episode, I turned into breadcrumbs leading her into a trap of her own making. But even as I orchestrated this, guilt gnawed at me. I had become like her. Lying, manipulating, staging discoveries. My panic attacks were real now, in a sense. I couldn't always tell where performance ended and true anxiety began. Some nights I found myself trembling in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying moments from the past year and wondering, had I lost myself in the process? Then the first real crack appeared. One evening, Mom pulled me aside after dinner. Her eyes were softer than they had been in weeks, but her voice shook. "Maya, I need to ask you something. Did you ever provoke her? Push her into lying about you?" My throat tightened. "Mom, I'm not accusing you. Everything's so messy. I don't know who's telling the truth anymore." I froze. Her doubt wasn't aimed at me yet, but the fact that she even considered it felt like betrayal. Even now, months after exposing Emma, the trust in our family was fractured beyond repair. 2 nights later, I discovered the first hidden diary she hadn't expected me to find. Unlike the decoy, this one was meticulous. Entries dated back 2 years, describing my moods, habits, moments of vulnerability, every detail used to plan her manipulations. She had been cataloging me longer than I thought. Reading it made my blood run cold, but also clarified something crucial: the depth of her fear. She didn't want to hurt me because she was cruel. She wanted to protect her own image, her own control. and control, I realized, had always been more important to her than family. Armed with this knowledge, I planned the next confrontation carefully. No yelling, no explosive displays. This time, I would expose her logic step by step in front of Mom. The morning came, quiet but tense. I left her diary on the kitchen table, bookmarked to the latest entry. Mom noticed it immediately. "Maya, what is this?" I met her gaze. "It's everything. Emma's plan, her strategy, the reason she's been manipulating everyone." Mom picked it up slowly, scanning a few lines. Her eyes widened. I don't know what to say." "Read it all," I urged. "Don't trust her version. Just read it." The next hour was surreal. Mom read silently, occasionally muttering to herself. Emma appeared in the doorway, expecting another confrontation from me, but instead, she was met with Mom's quiet, piercing scrutiny. "Maya?" Mom finally said, eyes on her. "Did you provoke her?" "No, Mom," I said, voice firm. "She planned everything. This isn't about me losing control, it's about her controlling everyone's perception for years." Emma paled. Then, shockingly, she broke down. Not the manipulative, composed breakdowns I had seen before, but a real, raw unraveling. She admitted everything. The recordings, the lies, the emails, the plans. She cried, yelled, and at times laughed bitterly at the absurdity of her own obsession. It was terrifying and, in a strange way, liberating. For the first time, the power shifted completely. Mom held both of us, listening, absorbing, trying to process a lifetime of secrets in a single afternoon. By the end of that day, something had changed. The house felt lighter, but it was fragile. Emma and I no longer spoke except when necessary, and Mom moved between us carefully, trying to rebuild trust where there had been none. Over the next few months, therapy sessions expanded, family counseling began, and we learned to navigate a new dynamic. Emma admitted she had been terrified of losing control, that her manipulations were rooted in her own insecurities, not malice, though the effect was still deeply hurtful. I realized forgiveness wouldn't be immediate, but understanding was possible. I also discovered another hidden layer. Emma had been hiding letters from Dad. Letters he had sent after the divorce, never delivered to either of us. They contained insights into family history, things I hadn't known. Reading them, I finally understood why Emma had been so obsessed with control. She had been trying to shield our family from repeating past mistakes. Not an excuse, but context. By the end of the first year after the dinner confrontation, life had shifted completely. Emma and I spoke cautiously, sometimes even laughed. Mom and I rebuilt trust slowly. And I had learned the harshest lesson of all. People we love most can betray us in ways we never expect, but understanding their fear, their motives, and their flaws doesn't excuse the damage. It simply allows us to reclaim our own lives. The following weeks felt like walking through a fog. The house was quieter, yes, but the tension between Emma and me lingered, like smoke that didn't dissipate no matter how many windows we opened. We spoke only when necessary, mostly logistical things, but even those conversations carried weight. Every word had history, every glance, accusation. I started keeping a journal, my own record, separate from Emma's obsessive cataloging. I needed to process my emotions, to untangle guilt from anger, truth from lies, and real fear from the ones I had manufactured during my year of faked panic attacks. Writing became a refuge, a place where I could finally admit how broken I felt, how scared I had been, and how much I had doubted my own mind. Then came the first breakthrough. Mom invited both of us into family therapy, cautiously, setting boundaries before the session even began. Our therapist, someone who had been neutral through all the chaos, guided us slowly, carefully, through each layer of deception and fear. Emma admitted more than I had anticipated. The small manipulations, the whispers to Mom, the emails, the fake narratives she had created for teachers, even the stolen money she had blamed on me. She cried openly, shaking, raw, confessing that she had been terrified of losing her place in the family and that her need for control had driven her to extremes she couldn't explain or justify. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said finally, voice trembling. "I thought, if I controlled everything, maybe we'd survive. Maybe we wouldn't fall apart like before." I swallowed hard. I wanted to yell, to tell her she had already destroyed so much, but I stopped. Instead, I listened, really listened, and I realized she had been both my enemy and my mirror. Her obsession with control had forced me to confront my own boundaries, my own capacity for endurance, and my own strength. The therapy sessions continued for months. Slowly, the frost began to thaw. Emma started acknowledging her actions without the dramatic performance. Mom learned to distinguish between her children's voices of fear, anger, and manipulation. And I, perhaps most importantly, learned to differentiate my own feelings from the chaos that had surrounded me for so long. One evening, after a particularly intense session, Emma came to my room. She sat on the edge of my bed, hesitant, hands clasped. "I know we can't undo the past," she said quietly. "But can we try again? I don't want to keep hurting each other." I studied her face. No lies, no hidden agendas, just exhaustion, fear, and hope. Slowly, I nodded. "Yes," I whispered, "we can try." But healing was never linear. There were relapses, arguments fueled by old memories, moments when one of us would misread a word or a glance, flashes of old resentment. Each time, though, the conversations continued. We didn't avoid the difficult truths anymore. We faced them together, even when it hurt. As months turned into a year, our dynamic shifted subtly but powerfully. Emma became more self-aware, apologetic without over-explaining, responsible without micromanaging. Mom, who had carried the invisible weight of our family's fractures for so long, finally exhaled with a measure of relief. And I learned to forgive myself for the deception I had employed, for the panic attacks I had faked, and for the ways I had manipulated Emma in return. Those acts had been necessary to survive, but survival had its own moral complexity. The final revelation came unexpectedly. One afternoon, while sorting through old boxes in the attic, I found letters Dad had written during the divorce, unopened and forgotten. They weren't just explanations. They were confessions of his own mistakes, reflections on parenting, and admissions of fear about how the family would fracture. Reading them, I understood that our dysfunction wasn't caused by any single person. It had been a cumulative series of misunderstandings, fears, and miscommunications. The clarity was liberating. I could see Emma's actions in context, but I could also see my own. We weren't villains. We weren't saints. We were flawed people, navigating a complicated, painful reality, learning along the way how to survive and eventually, how to live together again. By the second year after the confrontation, life had stabilized. Emma and I no longer lived in a constant state of vigilance. We had rebuilt routines, established honest communication, and set boundaries that respected both of us. Mom smiled again at dinner, and while the scars of the past never fully disappeared, they became reminders of resilience rather than sources of shame. And me? I finally understood what I had been seeking all along. Not control, not vindication, not revenge, but truth. The truth of who I was, who my sister was, and what it meant to survive betrayal by someone you love. The truth was messy, painful, sometimes unbearable, but it was real. And in reality, I found strength I hadn't known existed. I reflect on the experience often. I realize now that deception, whether mine or Emma's, is a powerful force. It can protect, destroy, or illuminate. But the greatest strength comes from confronting it openly, learning from it, and choosing connection over control. We are not perfect. We never will be. But we are alive. We are learning. And for the first time in a long time, we are free. Even now, I sometimes think back to that first year of panic attacks, to the nights I trembled on my bed, and I realize that survival isn't just about exposing lies. It's about enduring them, understanding them, and choosing your own path forward. I can say this: we survived, we rebuilt, we forgave, partially, imperfectly, but genuinely. And in the quiet moments, I see Emma and I laughing again, remembering the absurdity, the pain, and the fragility of the human heart.